Doctor stood before the massive crystal display in the Grand Council chamber. His forearms moved with practiced precision as he adjusted the holographic images floating above the assembled delegates. The historian's crystalline skin caught the light from the chamber's bioluminescent walls, creating patterns that showed his deep concentration. "Honored members of the Galactic Academic Council," began, his voice carrying the formal tones that had made him famous across 17 star systems. "Today, I present to you the greatest mystery our civilization has ever encountered." The chamber fell silent. Representatives from dozens of species turned their attention to the floating images. There were the gas-form ethereals, their consciousness barely contained within their environmental suits. The collective spokesperson, a living mass of interconnected neural tissue, pulsed with interest. Ancient elders, whose species had been exploring space for over 1,000,000 years, leaned forward on their stone-like limbs. Activated the first hologram. A stone tablet appeared, covered in strange symbols arranged in neat rows. The symbols looked almost familiar, yet completely alien at the same time. 43 standard cycles ago, we discovered the first of these tablets on the dead world of Prime, explained. At first, we believed it was simply another archaeological find, but as more tablets were discovered across the galaxy, we realized we were dealing with something unprecedented. The display shifted, showing a star map. Red dots marked 17 different worlds scattered across known space. Each dot pulsed with soft light. These tablets have now been found on 17 different worlds. Each tablet contains identical symbols, arranged in exactly the same patterns. The material composition varies based on local geology, but the symbols themselves never change, not even slightly. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. The ethereal's probability-based thinking patterns created visible distortions in their containment fields. The collective's neural mass shifted colors from blue to deep purple, indicating intense calculation. "For 4 decades, I have dedicated my life to understanding these artifacts," continued. "I have worked with the greatest minds in the galaxy. We have used every translation protocol known to science. Our quantum linguistic processors have run continuously for years, analyzing every possible pattern and combination." The historian's 4 eyes, each capable of seeing different light spectrums, focused on the assembled delegates. His species had evolved on a world with multiple suns, making them excellent at seeing details others might miss. Yet these tablets had defeated even their advanced visual processing. The Academy's most powerful crystalline neural networks have processed these symbols through every known framework. The results are always the same. These symbols follow no recognizable pattern. They match no known language, mathematical system, or even basic logic structure. A elder raised one massive stone appendage. "Doctor, surely you do not suggest these are random marks?" "No, honored elder. The precision is too exact for randomness. The symbols are deliberately carved with mathematical precision. The spacing between each mark is calculated to the smallest fraction. These were created by intelligent beings, but beings whose thought processes are so alien to us that we cannot even begin to understand their basic communication." Activated another display. Complex charts and graphs filled the air, showing decades of analysis results. Every line ended in failure. The Ethereal Probability Council ran 14 million different scenario analyses. Each one concluded that the probability of translation using known methods was effectively 0. The collective's distributed consciousness, with its ability to process information through thousands of linked minds, could find no pattern recognition whatsoever. The chamber's atmosphere grew heavy with the weight of the revelation. These were species that had solved the mysteries of faster-than-light travel, had mapped the quantum foundations of reality, and had created artificial intelligence that spanned entire solar systems. Yet simple stone tablets had defeated them all. Even the ancient megalith archives, containing knowledge from civilizations that existed before our species evolved, offer no insight. These tablets represent something truly unprecedented in galactic history. Doctor paused, allowing his words to sink in. His crystalline features reflected the chamber's light as he prepared for his conclusion. I have come to believe that these tablets represent our first contact with a form of intelligence so fundamentally different from our own that communication may be impossible. Their creators thought in ways that no current galactic species can comprehend. They represent a cognitive architecture that exists outside our understanding of consciousness itself. The collective spokesperson finally broke the silence. Its voice came from thousands of neural nodes speaking in unison. Doctor, what do you propose we do with this information? I request permission for one final expedition. There has been a new discovery on the rim world of 442b. A research station there has uncovered 3 new tablets in perfect condition. However, this station is operated by humans. Several delegates made sounds of confusion or amusement. Humans were the members of the galactic community, having achieved faster-than-light travel only 50 years ago. Their technology was primitive compared to most galactic civilizations. They were short, their bodies fragile, and their social structures chaotic. Honored Council, continued, I know humans are considered junior members of our community, but perhaps fresh eyes, unencumbered by our assumptions and methodologies, might notice something we have missed. If these tablets truly represent impossible intelligence, then perhaps the most primitive approach might yield new insights. The elder's voice rumbled like grinding stone. You wish to show the galaxy's greatest mystery to a species that only recently discovered fire in cosmic terms. I believe it is worth attempting. We have exhausted every sophisticated approach. Perhaps simplicity itself might provide answers. The vote was closer than had expected. The ethereals voted against, believing their probability calculations were absolute. The collective was divided, with some neural clusters supporting the idea while others considered it wasteful. But enough species voted in favor to grant the expedition. Very well, Doctor, announced the council speaker, an ancient being whose species had long ago transcended physical form. You have permission for one final expedition to the human research station. However, this will be your last opportunity. If even the most primitive analysis fails, we must accept that these tablets will remain forever beyond our understanding. As the chamber emptied and the displays faded, felt both excitement and dread. He had staked his reputation on this final attempt. 4 decades of work would be judged by whatever a handful of primitive humans might observe. He had no idea that his entire understanding of intelligence was about to be turned upside down. The human research station on 442b looked nothing like the grand academic institutions was used to. Instead of floating crystal spires or bio-grown structures, it was a collection of simple metal buildings connected by covered walkways. Everything was built for function over beauty, which seemed typical of human engineering. Doctor's transport ship settled onto the landing pad with a soft hum. As he emerged, carrying his portable analysis equipment in his 4 arms, he was greeted by a small group of humans. They looked exactly as primitive as he had expected. Their soft, pink skin had no natural armor. Their single pair of eyes could only see a tiny portion of the light spectrum. They had only 2 arms, which seemed inefficient for complex tasks. Doctor, welcome to our little outpost, said a woman stepping forward from the group. She had dark hair tied back in a simple style and wore basic work clothes covered in dust. I'm Dr. Sarah, the archaeological team leader here. We're honored to have such a distinguished visitor. Was surprised by her enthusiasm. Most species approached him with formal respect, understanding his reputation across the galaxy. But Doctor seemed genuinely excited, as if meeting him was a pleasant surprise rather than an obligation. Doctor, replied, using the formal tones appropriate for academic introduction. I appreciate your willingness to assist with this research. However, I must stress that these artifacts have puzzled the galaxy's greatest minds for decades. I do not expect your analysis to reveal anything new. I am simply fulfilling a promise to explore every possibility. Doctor smiled, which had learned was a positive expression among humans. Of course. We're just happy to help however we can. Would you like to see the tablets right away, or would you prefer to rest from your journey first? I would prefer to begin immediately, said. Time is precious, and I have limited resources for this expedition. Doctor led him through the station's corridors. The walls were covered with human artwork, photographs, and what appeared to be children's drawings. Found it puzzling that a research facility would be decorated with such unprofessional materials, but he said nothing. They entered a simple laboratory where 3 stone tablets lay on a basic metal table. Recognized them immediately as matching the mysterious artifacts he had studied for decades. But these were in remarkable condition, with every symbol clearly visible. We found these last month in what appears to be a burial chamber, Doctor explained. The preservation is incredible. Whatever species created them had advanced understanding of material science. Activated his portable analysis equipment, creating a detailed holographic scan of each tablet. The symbols were identical to all the others found across the galaxy. Precise, deliberate, and completely incomprehensible. Doctor, these tablets represent the galaxy's greatest linguistic mystery, began his standard explanation. The symbols follow no known pattern. Every translation method has failed. The most advanced artificial intelligences cannot find any meaning in their arrangement. They appear to represent a form of intelligence so alien that communication may be fundamentally impossible. Doctor picked up one of the tablets, turning it over in her hands as spoke. Her casual handling made him nervous. These were precious artifacts that had been studied by the galaxy's most careful researchers. The Academy has dedicated 40 years to this puzzle, continued. The Ethereal Probability Council ran millions of analysis cycles. The collective's distributed consciousness found no recognizable patterns. Even the ancient megalith archives offer no insight. Doctor said, still examining the tablet. She tilted her head to one side, studying the symbols from a different angle. These markings are really interesting. The style reminds me of some ancient Earth scripts. Felt a flash of irritation. How could this primitive human compare galactic mysteries to her species' brief written history? Doctor, I assure you that these symbols bear no resemblance to any known form of communication. They have been compared to the writing systems of over 3,000 species. Oh, I'm not questioning your expertise, Doctor said, continuing to rotate the tablet in her hands. It's just that sometimes when I can't read something, it helps to try different. She paused, tilting the tablet completely upside down. Wait a minute. Her eyes widened. She held the tablet at arm's length, reading from top to bottom with growing excitement. Oh my goodness, she whispered. This isn't impossible at all. Doctor began reading aloud. Here lies the brave defender of the northern valleys, who fell in the battle against the stone in the 47th year of the Great Peace. May his courage inspire future generations, and may his spirit find rest among the ancient mountains he loved. The laboratory fell completely silent. 4 eyes focused on Doctor with laser intensity. His translator device made small clicking sounds as it processed what had just happened. That cannot be correct, said finally. His voice had lost all its formal composure. Let me try the second one, Doctor said, picking up another tablet and immediately flipping it upside down. This one says, "Sacred to the memory of the wise, keeper of the great library, who preserved the knowledge of our ancestors through the dark years of the plague. His wisdom shall guide us until the stars themselves grow cold." Crystalline features began displaying rapid color changes, indicating extreme stress. This is impossible. 4 decades of research, the galaxy's most advanced minds, quantum linguistic processors, none of them could. Doctor had moved to the third tablet, and this one appears to be a bit more practical. Renovation of the eastern water channels completed in the 32nd year of the reign of Queen. May these waters flow clear for 1,000 generations. Construction overseen by master engineer. She looked up with a concerned expression. Are you all right? You look like you're in shock. The historian was indeed in shock. 43 years of his life had been dedicated to proving these tablets represented impossible alien intelligence. He had built his entire reputation on their mystery. The galaxy's greatest minds had agreed with his assessment, and now a human had solved the puzzle in less than 5 minutes by simply turning them upside down. How was all could manage to say. Doctor set down the tablet gently. Oh, that's pretty common actually. Lots of ancient writing systems on Earth were written in different orientations depending on the material, the period, or sometimes just the preference of the writer. When I can't read something, I always try flipping it around or reading it sideways or even backwards. It's just basic archaeological practice. The silence that followed was broken only by the soft humming of the station's air recycling system. Stared at the tablets, then at Doctor, then back at the tablets. His entire understanding of intelligence, of mystery, of the very nature of the unknown, was crumbling around him. The galaxy's greatest mystery had been solved by a human who simply knew to try turning things upside down. Sat in the station's small cafeteria, staring at a cup of human coffee that had grown cold hours ago. His 4 hands remained perfectly still on the table, while his crystalline features continued their slow color shifts between deep blue and pale yellow, signs of profound emotional disturbance that any would recognize immediately. Doctor sat across from him, occasionally glancing up from her tablet where she was documenting the translation of all 3 artifacts. She had suggested they take a break after had stood motionless for 20 minutes, simply staring at the upside-down tablets. Doctor, Sarah said gently, I hope I haven't upset you somehow. I know these tablets were important to your research. The historian finally looked up, his 4 eyes focusing on her with an intensity that made her slightly uncomfortable. Doctor, do you understand what you have done? I translated some old burial stones. You have destroyed 43 years of my life's work, said, but his tone was not angry. It was something much more disturbing. It was amazed. You have proven that the galaxy's most advanced civilizations are fundamentally flawed in ways we never imagined. Sarah set down her tablet. I don't understand. Surely other archaeologists have tried different orientations with ancient texts. Made a sound that his translator rendered as bitter laughter. Doctor, my species evolved on a world with rigid vertical structures. Our ancestors built their first cities by growing crystals upward toward our 3 suns. The concept of up and down is embedded in our neural architecture at the most basic level. When a sees text, we begin reading from the top, because that is how our minds are structured. He activated a small holographic display, showing images of towering crystal cities reaching toward multiple suns. The ethereals exist as probability clouds in zero-gravity environments. They have no concept of orientation at all, or rather, they consider all orientations simultaneously, which creates infinite possibility matrices that never resolve to simple solutions like turn it around. Sarah nodded slowly, beginning to understand. The collective shares knowledge through direct neural interface. When they encounter text, thousands of minds process it simultaneously using the same base assumptions. If the first mind approaches it incorrectly, all connected minds follow the same pattern. They cannot independently consider alternative perspectives because their strength lies in unified thinking. Stood and began packing, his forearms gesturing as he worked through the implications. The elders have existed for millions of years, but they process information through quantum consciousness matrices that analyze data at subatomic levels. They search for meaning in the spaces between molecules, not in simple spatial relationships that could be solved by physical manipulation. And humans? Sarah asked. Humans? Paused, his crystalline features shifting to deep green. Humans developed across multiple continents on a single world. Your species had to adapt to countless different environments, cultures, and ways of thinking. You had to learn to see things from different perspectives just to survive contact with each other. He turned to face her directly. Doctor, when you encountered text you couldn't read, your first instinct was to try multiple physical orientations. This is not advanced thinking. This is not sophisticated analysis. This is basic pattern recognition that your species developed simply because your development was chaotic and unpredictable. Sarah felt a strange mix of pride and embarrassment. So we solved it by accident. Not by accident, said, his voice growing more intense. You solved it because your species' greatest weakness, your inability to think in rigid, systematic patterns, is actually a tremendous strength. While we analyzed these tablets with quantum processors and probability matrices and distributed consciousness networks, you just picked them up and turned them around. The implications were starting to hit both of them. Sarah's portable communicator began chiming with incoming messages. Word was already spreading through the human research community. But the real explosion was about to begin when the news reached the galactic networks. Doctor, what happens now? Sarah asked. Before he could answer, the cafeteria's main communication screen activated. Doctor's research supervisor, Dr. Martinez, appeared with an expression of barely controlled excitement. Sarah, we're getting calls from universities across the galaxy. The preliminary translation report you sent has caused a complete meltdown of the academic networks. The Ethereal Probability Council is demanding immediate verification. The collective has gone into emergency analysis mode, and there's a priority message from the Galactic Academic Council demanding a full explanation. Move to the communication screen. Dr. Martinez, this is Doctor. Please inform the Council that the preliminary findings are accurate. The tablets have been successfully translated. Doctor, sir, with all respect, how is that possible? It appears, said slowly, that human cognitive architecture includes capabilities that we have overlooked. Doctor solved the puzzle through methods that our advanced civilizations never considered. Dr. Martinez's eyes widened. You mean the tablets weren't impossible to read? No, they were merely upside down. The silence that followed was broken by Dr. Martinez dropping something off-screen. When he recovered, his voice was barely a whisper. 40 years of research, the galaxy's greatest mystery, solved by turning them upside down. Yes. Doctor watched as both men processed this information. Her communicator was now chiming continuously with incoming messages. Through the cafeteria windows, she could see other research staff gathering in excited groups, pointing at their own devices. Doctor, Sarah said quietly, I think I should mention something else. This isn't the first time something like this has happened. Both men turned to stare at her. Last month, we found some mathematical inscriptions that the computational specialists said were impossible to solve. Our engineering team figured out they were using a base 6 number system instead of base 10. And last year, there were some star charts that the ethereal navigators couldn't make sense of, until one of our pilots suggested they might be showing views from inside a solar system looking out, rather than from outside looking in. Color patterns began shifting rapidly through the entire visible spectrum. How many other impossible mysteries have humans solved simply by thinking differently? Sarah consulted her tablet. According to our report's database, maybe 15 or 20 just from our team alone. but we always assumed we were missing something, since they'd already stumped much more advanced species. The communication screen activated again. This time it was an emergency transmission from the Galactic Academic Council itself. Doctor, report to the nearest galactic relay immediately. The Council is calling an unprecedented emergency session. Every major university in the galaxy is demanding access to human research teams. The implications of your report are significant. As the transmission ended, looked at Doctor with what she was learning to recognize as amazement. Doctor, I believe your species is about to become the most important archaeological consultants in galactic history. 3 months after the tablet incident, the University of Prime looked completely different. What had once been a serene center of traditional learning now buzzed with chaotic energy. Humans moved through the crystalline corridors alongside bewildered alien scholars, carrying stacks of previously unsolvable artifacts and chattering excitedly about new discoveries. Dr. Sarah stood in what had formerly been the most sacred archive of impossible mysteries, watching a human graduate student named show a group of ethereal probability specialists how to approach a mathematical proof by drawing pictures in the air with his fingers. See, you're trying to solve this by calculating every possible numerical relationship, was saying, sketching crude diagrams with a light pen. But if you just draw it out, you can see that it's actually describing the orbit of a moon around a planet. The numbers aren't abstract, they're telling a story about movement. The ethereal's containment suits flickered with rapid probability calculations, then suddenly stabilized into calm blue light. One of them spoke through its translator. The mathematical proof describes a narrative sequence. Exactly. Math doesn't have to be separate from storytelling. Sometimes the numbers are trying to show you a picture, and sometimes pictures help you understand the numbers. Doctor shook her head in amazement. 3 months ago, that particular proof had been considered one of the greatest unsolved mathematical mysteries in the galaxy. The Ethereal Probability Council had spent decades analyzing it with their most sophisticated quantum processing systems, had solved it in 20 minutes by treating it like a comic book. Doctor. She turned to find Doctor approaching, his crystalline features now permanently set to a warm golden color that indicated contentment mixed with excitement. Over the past 3 months, the historian had become one of the most enthusiastic supporters of human involvement in galactic academia. How are the orientation workshops going? Beyond my wildest expectations, he replied, his 4 arms gesturing enthusiastically. We have taught 17 species to consider alternative physical perspectives when examining artifacts. The collective has modified their neural linking protocols to allow individual minds to explore different approaches before sharing with the group. Even the ancient elders are learning to manipulate objects physically instead of relying purely on quantum analysis. Through the archive's transparent walls, they could see the strangest sight in galactic academic history. An elder, whose species had existed for millions of years, carefully turning a stone tablet in different directions under the patient guidance of a human undergraduate student. Doctor, the results have been extraordinary, continued. Last week, a team of Inhumans working together solved the mystery of the vegan geometric sculptures. It turns out they were architectural plans, but drawn from the perspective of someone flying above the buildings rather than standing on the ground. And the crystals of Alpha. Musical notation, said with what Sarah had learned was amusement. The crystals were designed to be struck in sequence to create harmonies. Our acoustic specialists had been trying to decode them as mathematical formulas for centuries. A human musician figured it out by simply tapping them with a stick. Sarah laughed. I heard about that one, said it sounded like a children's lullaby. Indeed, which raises fascinating questions about the nature of the civilization that created them. They walked together through the archive, passing dozens of previously mysterious artifacts that were now tagged with simple explanation cards. Navigation chart view from destination looking toward origin. Agricultural manual illustrations show seasonal changes. Poetry text arranged to create visual patterns when read aloud. "I have to ask you something that's been bothering me," Sarah said as they paused near a display of recently solved sculptures. "Doesn't this make you feel, I don't know, foolish? Your entire career was built on these being impossible mysteries." This color pattern shifted to deep contemplative purple. "Doctor, 3 months ago I would have said yes. I felt as though my life's work had been invalidated, but now I understand something different." He gestured toward a group of mixed-species researchers working together on a new artifact. These mysteries were not impossible because they were too advanced for us to understand. They were impossible because our civilizations had become too specialized, too rigid in our thinking. We had developed incredible abilities to analyze complexity, but we had lost the ability to consider simple alternatives. Sarah watched a collective researcher, its neural mass glowing with excitement, working alongside a human anthropologist to decode what appeared to be an ancient recipe book. "Your species," continued, "forced us to confront a fundamental flaw in how we approach knowledge. We had assumed that advanced intelligence meant complex analysis, but sometimes the most intelligent approach is the simplest one. But surely your civilizations had simple solutions to other problems. Within our own specialized areas, yes, but when we encountered anything outside our normal patterns of thinking, we automatically assumed it must require equally complex solutions. We never considered that another species might simply think differently than we do." An announcement echoed through the archive. "Attention all researchers. The spiral texts have been successfully decoded. They appear to be instructions for a children's game involving geometric shapes. The solution was achieved by a joint team of human educators and pattern specialists." Sarah and exchanged glances. A month ago, the spiral text had been considered one of the 3 greatest unsolved mysteries in the galaxy. "Doctor, I must tell you about the most significant development," said, his colors shifting to excited gold. "The Galactic Academic Council has officially established the Interspecies Perspective Institute. You have been nominated as the first director." "Me? But I'm just an archaeologist from a research station." "You are the person who taught the galaxy to turn things upside down," replied, "literally and figuratively." They reached the archive's central chamber, where a massive holographic display showed a real-time map of the galaxy. Hundreds of red dots indicated locations where impossible mysteries were being re-examined using human-influenced methodologies. Green dots marked successful solutions. "Look at this rate of discovery," marveled. "In 3 months, we have solved more ancient mysteries than in the previous 3 centuries. Not because we became smarter, but because we learned to think differently." "And it's accelerating," Sarah observed. "As more species learn these approaches, they're solving problems in their own specializations that they never could before." The holographic display updated, showing several new green dots appearing in the outer rim territories. "Doctor, I have a confession," said quietly. "When I first met you, I was certain that your primitive species could never contribute anything meaningful to galactic knowledge. I was wrong in the most fundamental way possible." "Well, to be fair, we are pretty primitive in most ways." "Yes, but that primitiveness includes cognitive flexibility that our advanced civilizations had somehow lost. You retain the ability to consider multiple perspectives simultaneously, to question basic assumptions, and to try simple solutions before complex ones." A human graduate student approached them, carrying a tablet covered in excited notes. "Doctor, we just figured out the crystalline matrices of Sigma Draconis. They're not mathematical models at all, they're maps of underground cave systems. You read them by imagining you're walking through tunnels instead of flying over terrain. As the student hurried off to share her discovery, Sarah turned to, "You know what the strangest part of all this is?" "What?" "We're not actually smarter than anyone else. We just never learned to stop asking, what if we tried it this way instead?" Crystalline features glowed with warm appreciation. "Doctor, perhaps that is the most important form of intelligence there is." 6 months after the first tablet was turned upside down, the Grand Council chamber of the Galactic Academic Council had been completely redesigned. The rigid, hierarchical seating arrangement had been replaced with flexible workspaces that could be reconfigured for different perspectives. Holographic displays now showed information from multiple angles simultaneously. Most remarkably, the chamber's traditional up and down orientation had been abandoned entirely. Delegates could now attend from any spatial orientation that felt comfortable to their species. Dr. Sarah stood at what might generously be called the front of the chamber, though the concept of front had become somewhat meaningless in the new configuration. Around her, representatives from dozens of species waited to hear her address. Some hung from the ceiling, others floated in zero-gravity fields, and a few existed as pure energy patterns that manifested wherever they chose. 6 months ago, Sarah began, Doctor stood in this chamber and told you about the galaxy's greatest mystery. Today, I'm here to talk about our greatest discovery. She gestured, and holographic displays materialized throughout the space, showing artifacts, equations, star charts, and architectural plans, all recently solved using what the academic community had begun calling perspective flexibility protocols. We have learned that intelligence is not about having the most advanced processing power or the most sophisticated analytical frameworks. Intelligence is about remaining curious enough to ask simple questions, even when you think you already know the answers. A elder, now comfortably positioned at what would have previously been considered an impossible angle, spoke in its ancient voice. "Doctor, could you quantify the impact of these new methodologies?" Sarah activated a galaxy-wide statistical display. In the past 6 months, we have solved 847 previously impossible mysteries. We have unlocked new areas of mathematics, archaeology, engineering, and even quantum physics, not by developing new technologies, but by learning to approach existing problems differently. The numbers were staggering, but Sarah knew they only told part of the story. More importantly, we have discovered that cooperation between species with different cognitive architectures creates exponential increases in problem-solving capability. Pattern recognition combined with human flexibility. Ethereal probability analysis combined with collective distributed processing, guided by human intuition. Deep time analysis combined with human adaptability. Doctor, now serving as the Institute's chief consultant, activated his own display. The implications extend far beyond archaeology. Doctor, perhaps you could discuss the engineering applications. Sarah nodded. 3 weeks ago, a joint human-ethereal team solved the problem of faster-than-light communication by approaching quantum entanglement from the perspective of musical harmony rather than mathematical equations. Last week, human engineers working with collective architects designed space stations that can reconfigure themselves based on the psychological needs of their inhabitants. She paused as excited murmurs filled the chamber in dozens of different languages and communication methods. But perhaps the most important discovery is this: every species in this galaxy has cognitive abilities that the others lack. We succeed not by replacing our unique ways of thinking, but by learning to combine them. An ethereal probability cloud flickered with interest. Doctor, what recommendations does the Institute have for future interspecies research protocols? First, always include multiple species in research teams from the beginning, not just for review purposes. Second, Establish assumption challenge protocols where team members are specifically assigned to question basic premises. Third, maintain what humans call beginner's mind. Approach every problem as if you might be fundamentally wrong about how it should be solved. Sarah activated a new display showing current research projects. We are currently working on 17 different, impossible challenges, ranging from the mathematical constants that seem to vary between different regions of space, to the archaeological evidence of civilizations that appear to have existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Are these being approached using the same methodologies? Asked the collective spokesperson. Yes, but with an important addition. We have learned to include what we call cognitive diversity audits in every research team. We ensure that we have not just different species, but different types of thinking represented. Analytical minds, creative minds, practical minds, theoretical minds, and what humans call outside-the-box minds. Doctor moved to join Sarah at the center of the chamber. "If I may add something," he said, his crystalline features glowing with satisfaction. The Institute has also begun training programs for what Doctor calls perspective flexibility. We are teaching established researchers to deliberately challenge their own assumptions and consider alternative approaches to familiar problems. How successful have these programs been? Asked a delegate whose species existed primarily as mathematical equations. Remarkably successful, replied. Last month, a crystallographer who had studied mineral formations for 2 centuries discovered an entirely new class of structures by examining them from the perspective of organic growth patterns instead of geometric ones. The breakthrough came when a human botanist suggested he consider how crystals might want to grow. Sarah smiled at the memory. The concept of crystals wanting anything had initially horrified this logical mind, but it had led to discoveries that pure logic had missed for decades. The Institute's next major initiative, Sarah continued, involves establishing permanent interspecies research stations throughout the galaxy. Each station will be designed to support the cognitive and physical needs of multiple species, while encouraging the kind of casual interaction that leads to breakthrough insights. As the formal presentation concluded, Sarah and walked together toward the chamber's exit. The session had gone well, but Sarah was looking forward to returning to practical research work. "Doctor," said as they reached the corridor, "I have something to show you." He led her to a small display case that had been installed near the chamber entrance. Inside was a simple piece of paper with colorful drawings on it, clearly the work of a very young human child. "What is this?" Sarah asked. Yesterday, the Institute received a request for analysis from the sector. They had discovered what appeared to be a complex symbolic system covering the walls of an ancient structure. Our team spent hours analyzing the symbols before realizing they needed to ask a simple question. Activated a holographic display showing the wall symbols alongside the child's drawing. "Doctor, could you please confirm which direction I should be holding this?" Sarah looked at both images and immediately burst into laughter. "That's not an ancient symbolic system. That's a child's drawing of stick figures and animals. Someone's 5-year-old drew pictures on the wall." Precisely. The ancient structure was actually a playroom in an abandoned colony ship. The complex symbols were created by a human child approximately 2 weeks ago, based on the pigment analysis. Sarah continued laughing as the implications sank in. "So now you're having to analyze children's artwork to make sure it's not a galactic mystery." "Indeed. And do you know what the most remarkable part is?" "What?" "It took our team 4 hours to realize they should ask a human to look at it. 4 hours of advanced analysis applied to a child's drawing before someone thought to ask the nearest human, 'What does this look like to you?'" As they walked away from the chamber, Sarah reflected on how much the galaxy had changed. The greatest discovery of the age had not come from advanced technology or sophisticated theories. It had come from learning to ask simple questions and considering simple answers. Behind them, the chamber continued buzzing with activity as species that had never worked together before planned joint research projects, shared cognitive techniques, and learned to see their universe from entirely new perspectives. The galaxy had learned to turn things upside down, and everything looked different from the new view.